He took on the entire political establishment. He took on the economic establishment, and he fought racism every step of the way. And what our job is not just to remember the history of Dr. King, it is to absorb his revolutionary spirit and apply it today. And that means we will fight racism in every part of American society. We will tell Republican governors they will not suppress the vote. If you're 18 years of age in America, you have the right to vote. End of discussion. Dr. King understood that there were the triple evils of American society were racism, were poverty, and militarism. And today we say in America, we will not accept massive levels of income and wealth inequality. We will not have a system where 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of American society, while 500,000 Americans sleep out on the streets of our country today. We will not have a system where we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people. Health care is a human right, not a privilege. We will not have a system where the very, very rich get richer while the poor get poorer, and half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. We remember Dr. King's revolutionary spirit, and we say to the 1%, you cannot have it all. This country belongs to all of us. Dr. King believed in ending war and militarism. And we are sick and tired of spending trillions of dollars on endless wars when our kids can't afford to go to college or are leaving school deeply in debt. We are sick and tired of people working for starvation wages because you can't raise a family on $9 an hour. We are sick and tired of a government which ignores the existential crisis of climate change. We are sick and tired of a racist and broken criminal justice system, disproportionately jailing African Americans, Latinos, and Native Americans. Brothers and sisters, the legacy of Dr. King is to have courage. This was a man who stood up against the war in Vietnam when it was not popular. This was a man who stood up to his own presidents when it was not popular. This was a man who stood up to the entire establishment of his time. So let me conclude in my 4.5 minutes. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. And if we do not allow Trump and his friends to divide us up by the color of our skin or where we were born or our sexual orientation or our religion, if we stand together, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish in the fight for economic justice, racial justice, social justice, environmental justice. In the spirit of Dr. King, let us stand together, let us go forward, let us complete the journey. Thank you very much.
And Senator Sanders didn't even mention how his clock watch has stopped this morning due to the cold. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome now to the podium the former Vice President of these United States of America, Joe Biden.
I tell you what, start the stopwatch. Look, some mornings I wake up these days and wonder whether it's 1920 or 2020. I hear the voices of violence and intolerance singing a chorus of hate throughout America. I hear the echoes of the not-too-distant past. In 1963, America witnessed the cruelty of Bull Connor, his dogs and fire hoses. I can still see those images as a kid on a black and white television. Fire hoses, driving people to the ground, ripping clothing, ripping skin off of people. Dogs, their fangs bared, rising on their hind legs. Those images shocked the nation. If Bull Connor had hoped to put a stake in the heart of the civil rights movement, he did the exact opposite. He focused at an inflection point in American history. America began to bend toward the moral arc of the universe, toward justice. We ended up with the '64 Civil Rights Act. We later had the Voting Rights Act. Dr. King called it the second emancipation. Dr. King was one of only two political heroes of mine. He and Robert Kennedy. His rightful place is alongside the founders of this nation. There's still giants, though, walking among us. I know no man of more courage than Congressman John Lewis. When I see him, I can't but help think, I haven't done enough. We haven't done enough. John Lewis reminds us, we don't celebrate Dr. King just for his dream. We celebrate him for the sacrifices, the hard work, and the determination, and above all, for his action. One of the lessons from that moment was the transformative change in our country. Is sometimes progress runs fastest when we're at our lowest point. Sometimes those who fan the flames of hate bring forth the next great wave of progress. The Bull Connors of the day don't stand in the streets with fire hoses and dogs. They wear nice suits. They wield their power, rolling back rights, punishing the poor, denying access to health care, quality education, turning away refugees and asylum seekers. Today, it's not fire hoses. It's like that guy carrying the flag with the Trump sign on it. It's not snarling dogs that's brought us to an inflection point. It's Donald Trump's poisonous, divisionist politics. We have a tremendous opportunity to take the next great step forward in racial justice, criminal justice, domestic justice, environmental justice. Folks, we have a chance to rip out the systemic roots of racism in this country. To paraphrase Dr. King, we have guided missiles, but we have misguided men leading this nation. So if you don't like what's going on in this country, you only have one thing to do: work. And don't stop working until November the 3rd. Together we can and will win. I know what it takes to protect voting rights in this country. I did in the Senate. I know what it takes to pass health care in this country. I did it with Barack, and we need to build on it now. Folks, I'm proud of the steps President Obama and I took to reduce federal prison populations. Now we need to go further. No mandatory minimums, end the private prisons, fund drug courts, bail reform, job training, and so much more. I know many of you become disheartened. It seems like we're on the verge of so much progress just a few years ago, and now so much we've gained is under attack. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. In 2009, I was standing on a platform in January in a city of my city that had been burned to the ground earlier in '68, waiting for a black man to pick me up from Philadelphia and take a train ride to Washington, D.C. to be inaugurated as President and Vice President of the United States of America. Folks, between America, the American ideal, we have created, so allegedly, all men are created equal. There's a harsh reality that racism has long torn us apart. Ladies and gentlemen, hate never goes away, it only hides. Give it oxygen as Trump has done, and it comes back. I also know, in the words of James Cleveland, I don't feel no ways tired. We don't feel no ways tired. We've come too far. We have from where we started. Nobody told me the road would be easy. And I don't believe he brought me this far to stop now. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Let's take back this country now.
As we continue, the sun's beginning to shine on a lot more of us now, and that's a good thing as it moves across the State House. We welcome now to the stage a gentleman that, well, not many of us, probably none of us knew before a couple of years ago or about a year ago. But a gentleman whom almost everyone in South Carolina now knows. Please welcome Mr. Tom Steyer.
Good morning. Here comes my crew with me. Look, today is a national holiday for Dr. Martin Luther King, because he was a towering political leader who changed the face of America. But he was much more than that, too. He was a spiritual leader who changed the heart of America. This isn't just a holiday, it's a holy day. And let me say this, for all of his genius, for all of his wisdom, for all of what he gave, even giving his life, when I travel around the United States of America, I know that I still see the problems that Dr. King was addressing. I can see cruelty when I go around the United States of America, and I can see political violence from a government that is literally taking food out of the mouths of hungry people, that is denying education to young people who absolutely need and deserve it, which is denying health care to sick people, a living wage to working people, and is allowing corporations to poison American citizens, particularly African Americans and Latinos, so that they can make more profits. I see cruelty in the United States of America. And if you think back to the story of Jesus, the story that informed so much of Dr. King's teaching and wisdom and thought, remember that in the time of Jesus, there was a cruel ruler named King Herod. And the only thing he could think about was his own political importance, and he was willing to sacrifice anything for himself. Does that remind you of anybody? So let me say this. Dr. King has a national holiday because he stood for justice for every American. But he was also the leader of the civil rights movement, particularly, specifically for African Americans. And when you look at the policy issues that the presidential candidates are addressing, you can't look at any of those issues without realizing that there's an underlying point about race in every one. Criminal justice, how do you discuss that without talking about race? Education, housing, how do you talk about environmentalism without pointing out that this society puts its poisons in black and brown communities? I've been to Denmark, South Carolina. I know who lives. Deanna's with us today. Deanna Barry is the leader of the activists there. I've been to Flint, Michigan. I know who lives in Flint, Michigan. You can't talk about these issues without talking about race. So I want to talk for a second about it. I believe that out of narrative comes policy. That until we tell the true story of the last 401 years, we're not going to get the just policy that reflects institutional legalized racism but also, of course, the contributions of the African American community over those 401 years. People talk about who built America, that's fine. We're also talking about the moral leadership of America for generations and centuries coming from the African American community. That story needs to be told so we can get a just policy going forward. So let me say at this point, I'm for reparations. I believe that in my presidency, on the first day, we will have a formal commission on race to retell that 401 years with a solutions basis so we can actually repair what's happened. This isn't a question about going back to recreate America, to make America great again. This is about going back to recognize what actually happened so that we can repair what happened, so we can go forward in an honest and just way. And let me say this. This is not the time for the people who are running for president to bicker with each other or complain. It's not time for wine caves and old stories and old videos. This is a time where we have a job. Beat Mr. Trump. There's no question about that. We know what he's going to do. We know he's going to try and divide us. We know he's going to take false credit for an economy that helps very few Americans. We're going to have to take him down, and I want to do that. I want to say something else. I know, I'm from California. I don't want to claim someone else's pain, but I know that we're a couple of hours from Charleston, where 2/3 of the African Americans in this country can trace their family legacy as enslaved people to come through the port of Charleston. So this is not the time to be polite. This is not the place to be polite. This is the time to tell the truth about where we are and turn the page on 40 years of cruelty from Republicans towards the people of the United States. James Baldwin said, "Not everything that is faced can be fixed, but until you face something, you definitely can't fix it." So let's live up to the legacy of Dr. King. Let's be brave enough to face it. Let's be organized, and he was a great organizer, to get together and change it. And let's create the America that fulfills the promise of Dr. Martin Luther King. Thank you very much.
All right, let's give Mr. Steyer another round of applause. And as we move forward, it's time to show a little, I guess, equality here on the stage as the ladies who are running for president of these United States come to make their presentations. We would like first to introduce to you and have you give a warm South Carolina welcome to Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Hello. Hello, South Carolina. Oh, it is good to be here, and thank you, the NAACP, and thank you. Let's all keep Sister Brenda in our prayers and hope that she's well soon. I am honored to be here on the 20th anniversary of a march that began with a righteous mission to tear down Confederate symbols of hate. I am grateful to join this historic march to honor a man who forever changed the course of history. We've come together to honor the life and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to honor his struggles and his triumphs, to honor his stand against racial and economic injustice, to honor his courage and his conviction. This is a moment of crisis for our nation. Our economy has been hijacked by the rich and the powerful. Our government has been hijacked by the rich and the powerful. Our democracy has been hijacked by the rich and the powerful. Look anywhere around you. The racial wealth gap holds back black families all across this nation. Tax breaks favor the rich. Toxic wastes are dumped in communities of color. And people getting stopped by the police are denied the right to vote because of the color of their skin. The list goes on. Housing and health care and child care, and a criminal justice system that tears apart black and brown families and has no accountability. We are in a fight for a country that works not just for the rich and powerful, but that works for everyone. Yes, we are in a fight, but I am here this morning with a heart filled with hope. Because while there's a lot that's broken, we still got our voices and we've still got our votes. And in a democracy, that means we decide what happens next. As I travel this country, I see firsthand the dream Dr. King imagined more than 50 years ago. Today, I march down this street with optimism because I feel hope, I see hope. America is ready to move beyond this dark moment of Donald Trump. America is ready not to go back to an old system of racism and economic injustice that was broken long before Donald Trump showed up. America is ready to go forward, to write the next chapter of our history. The next chapter, that will be an America where health care is a basic human right. That will be an America where safe and affordable housing is available and no one sleeps on the streets. That will be an America where young people trying to get an education don't get crushed by student loan debt. That will be an America where black entrepreneurs will get the same access to funding as white entrepreneurs so their businesses can grow and flourish. That will be an America where black mothers are not at greater risk of death simply because they are black. That will be an America where a run-in with law enforcement doesn't cost you your life because of the color of your skin. And that will be an America where every child, black or white, rich or poor, has access to a first-rate education, and where the school-to-prison pipeline is nothing more than a footnote in an old history book. And here is the best news, that America is within our reach. I'm running for president because I believe the only way we can reach that America is to stay in this fight, side by side, make each other's fights our own. You know, I grew up out in Oklahoma, and my daddy ended up as a janitor, but his baby daughter got the chance to be a public school teacher, to be a college professor, to be a United States Senator, to be a candidate for President of the United States of America. I am grateful, deeply grateful, and I am determined. I will fight my heart out so that every person gets a real chance in this life, a chance to build something solid. I know this is a hard battle, And I know many people think we can't win, but I am reminded of Luke 18 and the parable of the persistent widow. You remember her? She went back time after time to insist on justice. She didn't give up. She was a fighter. Jesus told his disciples they should always pray and they should never give up on their fight for righteousness. The Lord calls us to action. The Lord calls us to this fight. And like the persistent widow who won her fight even in an unjust world, I believe that if we work together, if we pray together, and yes, if we persist together, we will overcome. It is a great honor to share this day of remembrance of Dr. King with you. So thank you, and please keep me in your prayers. Thank you. We're going to do this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, man. Senator Warren said, close. And the candidates are still reminded of our time frames for today. And just as a footnote, I know I mentioned that we were now turning to the ladies on our list of presidential visitors today. Please know, all of you, that the presentation of the candidates this afternoon is lined up in order in which their schedules and their handlers were able to confirm their ability to be here with us today. So we are taking them, as they say, in the order in which they came. And next in that order is a young lady who has served her country in numerous ways so far before, including our United States military. Please welcome a young lady you all will get to know because she stands on her own. Please welcome Congressman Tulsi Gabbard. Excuse me, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard.
Good afternoon and aloha. You know, in so many ways, as we gather here to celebrate this day, it is one of the most important American holidays because it represents who we aspire to be rather than simply celebrating who we are or what we have been. Dr. King's legacy is one of love. Love for and service to God and to all of God's children. And throughout his life, he embodied that love through his example of how he lived and how he led, and how even during our darkest of days, he chose love. He said it is love that will save our world and our civilization, love even for our enemies. For me, his example inspired me even from a young age where I personally experienced that I was happiest when serving God, when working for the well-being of others and the planet, and this is what's motivated me throughout my life. As an Indigenous woman of color, I am inspired by the righteous army that fought for civil and human rights that we all enjoy today, powered by the bravery and sacrifices of Black women, many of whom called South Carolina home. Dr. King called Miss Septima Clark, born in Charleston, the mother of the movement. As a young teacher in Johns Island, she joined a young organization called the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And this is where she began her fight for equality and pay and education, even at great cost and sacrifice to herself. This struggle for equality and education and economic justice are ongoing battles for us all today. And we owe it to those who came and sacrificed before us to carry on those battles. My first visit here to South Carolina came almost 17 years ago as a young private, newly enlisted in the military and headed to basic training at Fort Jackson. I still serve as a major in the Army National Guard today. Like so many Americans, it was those attacks on 9/11 that motivated me to make a decision to dedicate my life to defend the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. I deployed twice to the Middle East, and I served in Iraq in 2005 during the height of the war. Every day we were all confronted with the terribly high human cost of war, the price paid by my friends, our nation's sons and daughters. But there's a price for war that we all pay that Dr. King recognized. He opposed the Vietnam War because he saw that cost, how our government spent $35 billion a year to fight in Vietnam, but would not spend $44 million to get rid of the rats in impoverished American communities. But as we stand here today, our leaders waste trillions of dollars on the new Cold War and wasteful regime change wars that have not made us any safer. Right now, we are wasting $4 billion every month on war in Afghanistan alone. Yet politicians tell us there's no money for our children's education, no money for teachers' raises, no money to make sure that our children have clean water to drink in Columbia, in Hopkins, Belton, and across the country. No money to keep our hospitals from closing in rural communities like Orangeburg and Denmark. As president, I will end this insanity, where instead of wasting trillions of dollars on death and destruction, I will turn our precious dollars towards the cause of life and renewal here at home. Ultimately, the legacy of Dr. King is one of peace and freedom. He understood that the road to peace, freedom, and justice requires that we stand up to violence, injustice, and fear without doing greater violence, inflicting greater injustice, or instilling greater fear. He understood that if we are serious about being a force for good in the world, a force for God's love, we must proceed from a place of love for all of God's children. Our failed foreign policy of regime change wars and nation building has reduced the Middle East to chaos and rubble. Millions of innocent civilians killed or maimed, what to speak of the thousands of my brothers and sisters in uniform who have been wounded and given their lives. My personal commitment to all of you is that as president, I will do my very best to follow the legacy of Ms. Septima Clark and Dr. King by taking the trillions of dollars we are wasting to enact death and destruction and instead invest it in the cause of life and renewal in the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an opportunity today to go beyond the celebration of the legacy of Ms. Clark and Dr. King by being a part of it. We have an opportunity to continue the work of our heroes. I feel so honored to be here to share this moment with all of you, standing shoulder to shoulder with heroes and soldiers in a 111-year-old army for peace, freedom, and justice for all. May God bless you all. May God bless America. Aloha. Thank you.
And for those of you looking to visit the great state of Hawaii anytime soon, they have one of those visitor booths set up in the back there, and Congresswoman Gabbard will be glad to welcome you and perhaps get you some discounted hotel rooms or something like that. Moving right along with our program this afternoon, please welcome one of the other ladies running for president of these United States. Please give a warm South Carolina welcome to Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Thank you. Wow, that sun is coming our way. So I think this is a balmy day. I am from a state that is right now 30 degrees colder in the state of Minnesota, and I'm used to doing things like this with 4 inches of snow on my head. So thank you for this warm kinship, that amazing walk. And as we marched together, I was reminded that Dr. King never really walked alone. During each of the steps on his journey toward greater justice, he was accompanied by so many that shared his vision. including so many right here in South Carolina. And he still is today. I'm thinking of all of you out here on this brisk morning standing up for justice. I'm thinking of the NAACP and the work that they do fighting for justice. I'm thinking of who I just saw out there, a great representative, Representative Clyburn, who stands up for your state every single day. And I am thinking of my friend Jamie Harrison that we want to see in Washington, D.C. Dr. King once said that we are all tied in a single garment of destiny. What affects one directly affects all indirectly. What does that mean? That means that when hate and bitter anger are on the rise every day, unleashed by those who sadly know exactly their intent and the result, when that hate is directed against one, it wounds all of us. It coarsens our civic life. You can see it in the senseless racist shooting of worshipers in Charleston. You can see it in that rabbi's home at Hanukkah, the stabbing. You see the bombing of the mosque in Minnesota. You see it after what happened in Charlottesville. And no, there are not many sides to blame, Mr. President, when one side is the Ku Klux Klan. There is only one side, and that side is the American side. That is it. That is all. When Dr. King said that we are all tied in a single garment of destiny, he also meant economic destiny, economic justice. What would he say when a pregnant African-American woman goes into a maternity ward in Louisiana, says her hands are swollen, and leaves without her baby because no one listened? He would say that is not justice. What would he say when an African-American vice president of a major company in my state goes into a store and is followed by store security the entire time? He would say that's not justice. What would he say when he found out today, after so many years of his work, that 30% of African-American kids still live in poverty? He would know that is not justice. He would call it out as it is. He would call for what? Equal funding for education in our schools, including right here in South Carolina, for ending child poverty in a generation. We can do this. He would call for criminal justice reform. He would call for investing in equitable health care and that everyone has clean water, affordable housing, child care, retirement security. That was his mission, and yes, that is our mission today. That is our shared garment of destiny. Finally, we cannot be tied in a single garment of destiny if we cannot vote. Because if we cannot vote, that means we cannot speak. That means our destiny is tied inextricably to our democracy. That means protecting the right to vote. It means reauthorizing the Voting Rights Act, rolling out automatic voter registration, stopping the gerrymandering, and taking the big money out of our politics. It was my friend Stacey Abrams, who should be the governor of Georgia right now. It was Stacey Abrams who said it best. She said, if you don't go to a church or a synagogue or a mosque or a temple for a few years or a few months, you do not lose your right to worship under the Constitution. If you don't go to a meeting like this every month or every year, you don't lose your right to assemble under the Constitution. And if you don't vote for a few years when you voted your entire life, you should not show up at the voting booth and find out that you have purged from the list and that you have lost your right to vote. That is not right under our Constitution. That is not right. I come from a humble background. My grandpa was an iron ore miner. He worked 1,500 feet underground in the mines in northern Minnesota. He saved money in a coffee can in the basement with my grandma to send my dad to a 2-year community college. My dad went on to become a newspaperman. My mom grew up in Milwaukee, also poor. She moved to Minnesota and she taught 2nd grade until she was 70 years old. And I stand before you today as a granddaughter of an iron ore miner, as a daughter of a teacher and a newspaperman, as the first woman elected to the U.S. Senate from the state of Minnesota, and a candidate for President of the United States. That is a country of shared dreams, that no matter where you come from, or what the color of your skin is, or who you know, or how much money you have, or where you worship, or who you love, that you can make it in the United States of America. That is the shared dream that Dr. King stood for. So I'm going to be leaving here tonight. I'm going to leave to go back to Washington, D.C., to do my constitutional duty. And I need you to keep the warmth going here for us in South Carolina. Because we may, the 3 of us up here that are going back there, we may be just 3 of those 100 jurors. But we know we represent all of you. And our job is to bring Dr. King's spirit of justice with us, just as we do justice for our country. And I know, as I get on that plane to go back to Washington, D.C. and sit in that chamber, that I will not stand alone. We go on behalf of the people of this great nation. We go on behalf of the truth. We go on behalf of justice. Because what? We are tied in one single garment of destiny. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to be part of your celebration. Thank you, South Carolina.
Oh, man. And I meant to mention before that the hand waving at the end of the speech also counts toward the 5, well, make it 7 to 8 minutes, okay? And the gentleman who has graciously accepted the time left by all of the candidates and the greeters that greeted us earlier, please welcome candidate for President of these United States and former Governor Deval Patrick.
Good afternoon, everyone. Special privilege for me to be here, not just as a candidate for president, but because I know where I am. It was here in South Carolina, where cotton was once king, where enslaved Africans landed in greatest numbers, where Jim Crow held on. And it was also here in South Carolina where the Congress of Racial Equality was formed, where Harvey Gantt peacefully integrated Clemson, where in many ways the resistance took shape in the 1950s and 60s. It was South Carolina's own legendary U.S. Senator Strom Thurmond who led fellow white supremacists out of the Democratic Party, and the same Senator Thurmond who would later cast his vote to confirm me as head of the Civil Rights Division. It was here in South Carolina that the NAACP worked successfully to create one of the first majority-minority congressional districts, a district whose existence I defended in the Supreme Court and in Congress. And it was also here that the federal task force I led tracked down the Klansmen who burned black churches in Manning and Greeleyville. South Carolina, in other words, is a study in America herself, a contrast between remarkable progress, much of it in my own lifetime, and a reminder of how much work remains to be done. It's just like Massachusetts and just like everywhere else. America is an extraordinary experiment. We're the only nation in human history organized around a handful of civic ideals. And we've come to define those ideals over time and through struggle as equality, opportunity, and fair play, the essential ingredients of freedom itself. The inheritance of every generation is to confront the gap between our reality and our ideals and then to work to close it. Dr. King claimed that inheritance. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't wait for a poll. He didn't make a path through celebrity. To paraphrase Elder Coleman yesterday, he was not about building a brand, he was about building a beloved community. He understood that America, a place dedicated to these values of equality, opportunity, and fair play, had to be a nation with a conscience, and that America cannot be great without being good. Dr. King made a claim on that conscience. And then, importantly, he set to work to deliver. That's what changed America. It's the only thing that ever has. I grew up a poor kid on the south side of Chicago. I lived there with my mother, my sister, my grandparents, and various relatives who came and went in our grandparents' two-bedroom tenement. Our schools were overcrowded, under-resourced, sometimes violent. Our sidewalks were broken. Our playgrounds were broken. Our neighbors were broken. But we had a community. Because that was a time when every child was under the jurisdiction of every single adult on the block. You messed up down the street in front of Miss Jones, she'd go upside your head and then call home, so you got it 2 times. What those adults were trying to teach us is that membership in community is understanding we have a stake in our neighbors' dreams and struggles, as well as our own. That is what a beloved community is. I remember seeing Dr. King speak. I was 6 or 7 years old, and my mother took my sister and me to see him in a park not too far from where we lived. And to tell you the truth, I don't remember a single thing he said. But I do remember what it felt like. I remember how solemn it felt, how important we felt, how hopeful it left all of us in that park, people just like us, of limited means but limitless hope. People build whole lives on hope. Jim Crow was legally dismantled. Voting rights was fought for and won. Like many of you here, I'm sure I got my chance. Once denied people like me to go to college and law school, to be a civil rights attorney and a business executive, to be a 2-term governor of Massachusetts, the first black man ever to be so, and only the second elected after Reconstruction in America. You know, my grandmother used to say to us, hope for the best and work for it. And I think it was around about that time that she started to say to us that kind of thing. In fact, she used to say around then, stop saying we're poor, say we're broke, because broke is temporary. That was a woman descended from slaves in Kentucky. And she had more faith in the American dream than a little bit. But the barriers to chances like mine are getting higher and harder. The beloved community Dr. King envisioned is at risk. You all know that. The cheery economic indicators just don't tell the whole story. Unemployment is low, as long as you count both or all 3 of the minimum wage jobs people have to survive. Inflation is low, as long as you don't count the cost of education, housing, or health care, the very things that make it possible for people to lift themselves onto a path of economic mobility. Nowadays, health, wealth, opportunity among black Americans is lagging. But that same sense of being unseen and unheard, that's being felt all over America today. In rural communities and small towns where the kids have to move away to make a way. In many a suburb where people rely on a credit card and the food pantry to make ends meet. Young people are trapped either by student debt or by a criminal record. And yet we've got a president who dedicates every waking hour to dividing us, who views his role as entertaining us instead of making anybody's life better. All of that makes it worse. But the truth is that even before this president, the poor were stuck in poverty and the middle class were just a paycheck or two away from being poor and deeply anxious about it. What are we going to do? That's the question today reminds us to ask ourselves. What kind of beloved community separates and cages children in order to dissuade their parents from seeking refuge from violence? What kind of beloved community cuts school support when knowledge is the key to the future? What kind of beloved community takes away health care from people and tries deliberately to drive up the costs? It's time for us to use the power we have. We can't go from hope and change to fear and settle for that. Not in a nation with a conscience. Dr. King and his allies didn't fight and die for the right to vote for us to sit idly by and wait for someone else to save us. No one's coming to save us but us. And so we have to register to vote in the next 9 days, and we have to turn out to vote on February 29th, and we have to work with each other in between to come off the sidelines, to care again about tomorrow, to invest time and energy and money and courage in building the kind of beloved community we deserve. That's our power. Don't wait for anybody's permission. Don't wait for anybody's polling. Don't wait for anybody to outsmart the electorate. Time after time, we've tried that and it's failed. When you use that power, I ask you to use it wisely, because we need change that lasts. Dr. King didn't accept false choices, a trade between justice and prosperity. I am proud to be a Democrat, but I don't think you have to hate Republicans to be a good Democrat, any more than I think you have to hate business to be a social justice warrior or to hate police to believe Black Lives Matter. We get sold false choices all the time. Look past that. Dr. King understood there were potential allies everywhere if we set our bold agenda and then made room for people to come and discover their own conscience on our cause. And as we do, be mindful that it will take the very building of bridges that Dr. King was so good at in order to make change that lasts. All of us talk about delivering health care to everybody. All of us do. 99% of the people in Massachusetts today have health insurance. All of us talk about fighting climate change. In Massachusetts, we've closed all of our coal-generating plants. We have moved to #1 in the nation in energy efficiency, and we have rebuilt our economy on a clean tech future. All of us talk about criminal sentencing reform. In Massachusetts, we ended minimum mandatory sentencing for nonviolent drug offenders. Most talk about job creation. In Massachusetts, we came out of recession with a 25-year job high. Dr. King understood talk without action was not enough. And as you consider your vote, I ask you to remember, where other candidates have plans, we have results. As I take my seat, I ask you also to remember another lesson of Dr. King, and that is to have faith in each other. Have faith in the American people. It's hard. How many times have we been disappointed? How many times have we been spat upon, kicked, called a name? How many times have our fellow Americans treated us as if there was no fellowship at all? And yet we still, in Dr. King's model, must be bridges to each other. I want to tell you that even in a time when we have been bullied for so long by an unfit and unkind president and by his relentless propaganda, we have to keep that faith. It doesn't surprise me that we are on our side trying either to offer our version of his division or our hope for some yesterday to come and make it all better. I want you to have faith in each other because we are still a nation of conscience. And when that conscience is called upon, it might surprise you to know that there are more of us than there are of them. I remember at the end of my second term, we were facing a crisis at the southern border very like this one, when thousands and thousands of unaccompanied minors were coming across the southern border fleeing violence in Central America. And the federal authorities were overwhelmed then just as now. And the Obama administration asked a number of governors if we would help shelter these children while they were being processed as refugees. And I agreed. And I explained my reasons why to the people of Massachusetts as coming from a place of both patriotism and faith. But even so, immigration was hot then just like now. And I was called everything but a child of God. A couple days later, I was sent by my wife of 35 years with a list of things to get from Home Depot early one morning. And I thought, I'm going to slip out and do this quickly. I don't have to bother the troopers in my security detail. So there I was in my T-shirt, jeans, and flip-flops, baseball cap, and dark glasses. I hopped in the truck, and I took off, and I got to the Home Depot. And I was outed by the manager in the very first aisle. "Governor," he said, "welcome to Home Depot. How can we help you?" I met a man in the checkout lane, and he was angry. Not threatening, but angry. And he pointed and he shouted and he said, "Governor, I can't disagree with you more. I think your decision was wrong." He said, "My own wife came here legally. She's an immigrant. That's how it ought to be." And I thanked him for his feedback. There was no point in trying to engage him at that point about how being a refugee is in fact legal. It wasn't the time or the place. In the same store that day, I had 6 other encounters on the same subject. And in every one of those, someone came up to me and whispered, "Governor, you're doing the right thing. Governor, thanks for looking out for those kids." The calls to the office were 2 to 3 to 1 in favor of sheltering those children. And on reflection, it occurred to me we have learned, all of us, to shout our anger and to whisper our kindness, and it's completely upside down. We need to learn again to shout our kindness, to shout our compassion, to shout our justice. That is what makes the beloved community Dr. King cried out for and that we yearn for today. Let's go back to that. Shout justice. God bless you all. Thank you for having me.
We want to thank Governor Patrick for reminding us of the registration deadlines as well, and reminding each and every one of you that early voting begins on January 29th. Early voting begins January 29th, and there are registration tables here for us today. Please welcome to the stage now another gentleman who needs no introduction to any of us. our 6th District Congressman and Majority Whip of the United States House of Representatives. Please welcome the Honorable James Clyburn.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let me thank all of you for being out here today to help continue this tremendous tradition.